You can't be secure without identity. You can't deliver online services without identity. You cannot deliver employee productivity without identity. You can't do anything really. You can't do this podcast without identity. So there's a lot of things I think which will probably surprise non-identity practitioners. I think for the people who've been in the identity space for a long time, I think it will give a better set of analytical tools. I think there's a lot of assumptions you can make if you spend time, a long time in any technology sector. And I think it's really about unpicking some of those maybe bad habits or complacencies we all get into and trying to say, look, have a fresher and I guess more contemporary analytical framework to look at how identity should be measured, how it should be integrated, what problems it should be solving, in trying to help analyze both the vendors and also existing deployments, because nobody has the luxury of designing things from scratch and picking out the best technologies. You have to deal with existing systems, existing problems. So I think the big takeaway will be at least provide people with a set of analytical tools that they can look at their existing systems, existing vendors, existing suppliers, and be a little bit more informed around what success looks like.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm doing great. I do have one complaint. Okay.
No, that's shocking. You complain?
No, only one. That's the shocking part. So
it's what is it? One complaint with like 8 different bullet points?
Yeah, exactly. No,
Okay.
we're doing awesome in terms of, or what I should say is, our listeners are doing awesome in terms of, downloading the podcast, listening to it, mostly on like audio only formats. I've checked out our YouTube site, our numbers. What would you call those? Rookie numbers, right? So, not complaining is definitely not a knock on our listeners.
Be careful, Jim. Don't tick off our listeners.
I'm not taking off the listeners, hopefully. But what I wanted to say was I was watching this channel earlier today. So it was Beard versus Food. The guy's had a video out for 1 year where he eats a pizza. Basically, he eats a pizza during the episode. 8.5 million views. So he's doing something right that we're not doing. What could it be?
Doing something right? I don't know about right. Doing something that's attracted viewers, I guess. I don't know. I mean, if you have a beard, if you want to eat pizza while recording, and if you think that'll get people to like and subscribe, we can give it a shot.
Well, I'm up for anything, so I'll give it a shot. I'll take a video of me eating pizza. We'll see if we get 8.5 million views.
Unlikely, but hey, you never know. This is how maybe you go viral, right? Things like that.
I'm pretty sure you can monetize that many views, right?
I mean, for sure, yeah. I mean, if you're pulling that stuff in, that'll probably pay for the pizza that you're eating.
No, so Beard versus Food is the guy who does all these eating challenges. So the pizza was a 30-inch pizza. So it was pretty much like the size of the moon. And he ate the whole thing in one sitting. And he was the first person to ever beat this challenge. It was actually at a pizza place in Norway. So really cool channel. I think there's a lot of channels out there, but I think, the coolest one is still Identity at the Center.
Oh, without a doubt. It does make me wonder about your algorithm. Like, why is this being pushed into your feed?
Well, 2 things. One is I'm going to Norway next week, so I've watched a lot of videos as I've covered in past episodes. I think the other thing is that, like, this guy's channel is awesome. Watching people eat like massive amounts of food in like 20 minutes is pretty entertaining.
I'm struggling with why this is entertaining. It's just watching people eat. Like, what's the point?
He's doing something that you can't do. If you can eat a 30-inch pizza, I mean, I'm sure you could build a heck of a following.
Okay. Well, I guess to each their own.
Yeah, I guess so. So
All right.
we should talk about our conferences. By the way, I'm going to have a cache of stickers with me at every conference. I'm going to make sure that you've got a pocket full of stickers too at all times. So if folks see me or you, that's another reason to go out to YouTube. So they can see our face and recognize us when they see us on the conference floor. We have stickers, and they're good stickers. They are like vinyl stickers. So they're kind of weatherproof, dishwasher proof, all that. And we'll have them.
Yeah. Jim is very proud of these stickers, so you definitely want to get one for sure. Let's talk about the conferences, because you and I are going to be at EIC, and well, by the time people listen to this, tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow. So it's kind of the last chance for people to use the discount code. If you haven't already registered, probably want to get on that, but it's May 6th or the 9th. If you use the code IDAC25MKO, that'll get you 25% off. Like I said, if you're listening to this, chances are you're probably already registered or you're not going to be there, but we will be at EIC. And looking forward to that. Then we've got the Identiverse conference coming up. That's in Las Vegas. So kind of a quick turn from Europe over to the US, June 3rd to the 6th. We have the code IDV25-IDAC25, another 25% off for that one. So we hope to see lots of friendly faces there. And I think we're at the spot now where we're going to say, hey, we are bringing our game show to Identiverse. And we have, at least for now, called it Identisquabble. So this
we finalized on the name, Identisquabble.
Yes, for now, right? And I gave a lot of thought over this, and then you just kind of blurted it out, I think, yesterday in real time as we're talking about this. Like, oh, yeah, that's better than anything I've been thinking about. So we'll just go with that. So, yeah, Identisquabble. We're going to kick off, I think, the expo kind of opening night in the expo hall. So we'll have a space there. I will bring my cameras, and I definitely want to try and turn this into an episode. But if you're familiar with what we did at the Authenticate conference last year, it is a family feud style game. So Jim is going to be a team captain. We're going to have another team captain, a couple of teammates for each of those. We're going to have judges and things like that. They're going to help with, deciphering the answers that our contestants come up. And I will be playing the role of MC or Steve Harvey or whatever you want to call me, trying to keep these cats moving in the same direction. So looking forward to that. Definitely want to invite people out to that. So if you're going to be in Identiverse or at Identiverse in Las Vegas, definitely come check us out the opening. I think we're the first on the board that night. So I think it's like 5:30 or 6 p.m. or something like that will be there. But looking forward to seeing friendly faces and having some fun. So it's going to be just a fun. I don't know if you'll learn anything, Jim, but hopefully you'll be entertained.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll learn how goofy we can get, but I think it'll be a good time. So I'm really excited about the guest that we have. As somebody that I've known in this identity space since all the way back in his ForgeRock days. And before we got started recording, he mentioned that he's on an Ubuntu computer, which I thought, oh, that's so him. That's so legacy ForgeRock classic to be on some version of a Linux laptop. So I had to, or I'm not sure if it's a laptop or desktop. I shouldn't say laptop. But why don't you go ahead and introduce him?
I mean, it's Linux. It could be anything. It could be a Flipper Zero for anything that he could be recording on right now. So
yeah, it could be a BlackBerry, right?
Right. Who knows? Let's introduce Simon Moffatt. He's an identity researcher and author. He's an identity podcaster, just like we are, and he's the founder of the Cyber Hut. So, Simon, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, it's great to be on. I've listened to you guys for a while. As you know, it's a small world in the identity space, albeit it's getting bigger. So you guys doing a great job in entertaining us and informing us of all of the identity world. But it is a laptop. It is a Linux laptop. I don't know why I fell into Ubuntu. Actually, it wasn't really a ForgeRock thing, albeit being in the open source game, I guess, for, 10, 20 years, I suppose. But I don't know, I fell into using Ubuntu 15 years ago and, not really seen an I'm not a Mac fan, and nobody likes Microsoft, did I? Should I say that?
Hey, I'm on a Mac.
So I've used Linux and Ubuntu for a long, long time. I think everything's browser based these days, isn't it? Everything's web based. So I thoroughly enjoy having a very lightweight laptop. You probably can't see. My Kindle is my main device of choice these days. A nice old-fashioned scribe and a Kindle, and my mobile phone. I can just about get by most days with that. I'm just the 5 years of the laptop may disappear. But that's probably another podcast's worth of conversation about what devices we may end up using in 5 years from now, I guess.
Well, I think we could definitely have a conversation about that at some point, because I think if you've been following like where some of the tech companies are going, it's glasses are back.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's
Google
Google Glass was like a big thing a couple of years back, and then now we're getting back into what I would call more normal looking glasses. And I have some that I use like when I travel that are, I plug it into my phone and I can watch a video and a movie like in a huge screen. But there's a lot going on for sure.
No,
I'd like to get to know more about
transients.
you, Simon. So one of the things we like to do with the first time that we have people on for the show for the first time, and I'm kind of shocked that it took 347 episodes to do that, is let's find out about your background. How did you get into this space of identity and access management, or digital identity, or whatever the heck we're calling it these days? Is it something you chose, or did it choose you?
It seems a long time ago. I started in 2001, so that's nearly 25 years, which is, that's an absolute eternity in any technology or any career, I guess. And I think identity has seen just huge transformation in that time. But I did sort of fall into it ultimately. I did economics at university with my sort of first degree, utterly unrelated to identity and access management. And you sort of roll out of university at sort of 21, 22. What should I do in this big wide world? And I ultimately took on a contract straight out of university for 3 months, working for a large insurance company in the UK. And it wasn't a particularly complicated contract, as you can imagine. At the age of 22 or something, you don't really have many great life skills at this age. And the job was for 3 months to do mainframe security administration. And the project essentially was this insurance company had about 37,000 users, and they ran out of user IDs. Can you believe it? On their RACF mainframe system. Long story short, they ran out of IDs. So the project, they pulled in 3 or 4 graduates who we all didn't know anything about mainframes or identity or anything like this. And they brought us in for 3 months, and we essentially had to go through this list by hand, 36,000 identities within RACF, and essentially copy and paste them onto a new RACF ID. So if your ID was, I think it was something like 5 numbers in a letter, so say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then A. And we had to essentially change the ID to be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then A, something like this. I can't remember the details. But anyway, we literally had a printout every day from PeopleSoft, and we used to go through this list, find the ID within RACF, and then copy and paste them, set up all of the TSO options, the job control language stuff, the data, just all this stuff I knew nothing about at the age of 22, but it was all by hand. So there was no connectors, there was no provisioning systems, there was no ticketing systems. So they essentially brought in actual people with sort of shovels to shovel through this huge list of mainframe identities. And obviously the project never lasted 3 months, it lasted 12 months. And that was my first taste of, first and last taste of mainframe security administration and TSO IDs and job control languages and Carla languages, all this crazy stuff. But it did get me into this identity world. And from there, I spent another 3 or 4 years in-house for this insurance company, looking after their Novell directory services for the mainframe, looking after 30,000, 40,000 identities in Novell, and that was then replaced by Active Directory. So all of the good learning skills, having to look after servers. People remember servers? Don't get servers anymore. So having to look after servers, having to do health checks, having to script things, having to build out sort of resilience and directory replication topologies, and all this really by hand stuff, which no way do you need to do in 2025. But as a young guy starting my career, it was great. I learned loads. I was working with experienced professionals, technology of all calibers, old-fashioned mainframes, what at the time was pretty cutting-edge Novell directory. So it was a really good apprenticeship, if you like. I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then I went into consultancy for a couple of years. Similar sort of stuff, directory services, moving a little bit more into the sort of networky world as well, things like VPNs and firewalls and the like, but still very much focused on the directory. And then I guess I got a big break, if you like. Probably 6 years into that, I started. I didn't start. I joined a startup called Value, which was one of the early pioneers in role-based access control and identity certification and access review. And they had a stellar 2 or 3 years, and were then acquired by Sun Microsystems. They become Sun Role Manager as part of the open source Sun stack, Sun Identity Manager, the DS, Sun Access Manager, all this stuff. And they acquired this tiny company called Value as part of their role-based access control strategy. And the rest is history after that, if you like. A lot of time then spent in the vendor world. And it's looking back, even sort of the early 2000s, things have changed just substantially, really, in a whole host of ways. I did 15 years in the vendor landscape at a time at Sun Microsystems. They were then acquired by Oracle. I had a couple of years at Oracle looking after the European identity business there for Oracle Identity Analytics. And then I spent a good 8 or 9 years at another open source company called ForgeRock, at least partially open source. Started open source, ended up closed source for various different reasons. It was a great journey. I was doing sort of solution architectural work, and finished off doing 4 or 5 years as a product manager there for their access management technologies. And part of that, to sort of close this little story off, part of that process was looking at emerging technologies. You know, what should ForgeRock do next? So looking at startups, looking at standards, looking at OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect, and what's going to happen next. And it was a struggle because I couldn't find the information I was looking for. And yeah, we have big research agencies out there doing high level quadrants and compasses and this sort of stuff, but I was struggling to find that knowledge of the next big thing, if you like, the startups, the emerging patterns, use cases, etc. And that really was the inspiration to set up an organization called the Cyber Hut, which I set up during the pandemic. If there's ever a difficult time to start a business, do it during the pandemic when the whole world is shut down. But actually, in hindsight, it was a huge opportunity because everybody else was at home as well. So I founded the Cyber Hut the end of 2020, start of 2021, looking all of the exciting, cool, emerging identity technologies, use cases, patterns, vendors, all that sort of stuff, and attempt now to deliver enablement, research, vendor guides, training, all of the stuff to just help the world understand our amazing identity practitioner knowledge, vendor knowledge, and all of that stuff. And it feels like a really good journey. So a lot of knowledge accumulated in that time, a lot of change, as you can imagine, as you guys have seen as well. I think the world has changed spectacularly, even the last 10 years, let alone the last 25. So things like servers,
last 10 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, well, exactly. You know, they've got AI to deal with as well. So it's been great. I feel pretty privileged actually to be doing what I'm doing now, which is essentially, you know, being briefed by technology vendors, understanding what's happening next, understanding what use cases are being solved, and attempting to translate that into consumable knowledge, if you like. So it's of all the jobs I've had over the last sort of 25 years, I feel this is the nicest job, I think.
Is there a particular content that you like, that you kind of have an affinity to? Is it written? Is it audio? Is it reports? Is it research? Is it thinking about the future, right? And sort of ideating, like, where is this thing going? And we're going to get to a book you're writing, you know, on that topic. But is there a specific thing that you really kind of like, yeah, this is really my favorite part of this part of what I do?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think content is really interesting for me. I think it has, the technology has changed, so has content. I think, you know, we are swamped with material, aren't we? We have material everywhere. On your phone, your Kindle, you can research anything, 30-inch pizzas if you want. You know, wherever you go, whatever you want to buy a new car, you can find as much content as you like. So information overload is the issue. So I think it's trying to deliver content in design material in a variety of ways. And that's something definitely the Cyberhuts experimented with, being, the podcast thing, but also taking maybe a big research report and then breaking that down into a whole host of different channels and different opportunities, from 1 or 2 minute training sort of videos or training shorts, buyer guides, training in a written form. So I think the content aspect is totally changing. I think for me personally, I like to read and write. I think most people do. I consume via reading, but I also helps me think to write. So if I'm ever stuck on something, I write, because then I can much more easily understand it. And if I can understand it, I can then deliver that in a way which other people can. But I think it's always about, to me, there's 3 things you should always be doing. 3 E's, essentially: educate the audience, empower them, and maybe entertain them a little bit as well. So it's how you can get some of these complex topics we're all engaged with now. How can we put that across in simpler ways? And I think we have to do it in a variety, whether it's written, books, reports, podcasts, whatever. I think it's a variety.
Simon, I have a question about your writing process. Take us through that. Like, do you like to write at night? Do you like to write in coffee shops? Or what's the perfect situation for you to get the most creativity out of your time?
Do you know? I think there's a few parts to this. A lot of people. This is my second book I've done, so that's, I don't know how many pages I did, 700 pages. But I as an analyst, I write for a living, in the sense of I write all the time. Writing isn't difficult, and I say this with a bit of a quip here, but the difficult part is thinking about what to write. The act of writing something, if it's researched and thought about, it should take seconds. It should take is quick to write as it does to read, in my opinion. That's how I typically like to operate. And my modus operandi is I'm thinking. And by thinking, I've got my Kindle here now, my Kindle and my Scribe. I use this daily, hours per day, writing, sketching, notes, small things. I'm quite pictorial, so I like pictures, matrices and diagrams and drawings and stuff like this. And I will do that constantly. But a lot of the time it's thinking about the topic, thinking around the topic, thinking sort of through the topic, and trying to create counterpoints, and I guess arguing myself out of a particular position, for example. And I think if you spend time on that aspect, on the thinking aspect, the writing, to me, is relatively simple. But I think you do have to be dedicated at it. So it's a bit like going to the gym. You have to do a little bit every day, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, even if you have writer's block or content block or whatever. Just do something little, a line, a sentence, a word, anything. And that just continues to push that rock a little bit further forward. But I think, I'm always jotting stuff down. I've got reams and reams of notes for all sorts of stuff. And over time, it sort of builds out a bigger picture. And then the execution aspect, physical act of writing, is pretty straightforward for me personally.
You've mentioned the podcast, and I've mentioned it as well. Tell us a little bit about the Analyst brief, because you do this with our friend David Motties. And I'm curious, like, what is the topic? How did you get this thing started? And just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's not as professional as this one, though, guys. This is you guys are doing the professional. So I guess the Analyst brief is a couple of things really. I think it's we try to make it part of that contemporary, back to that content view, trying to provide that contemporary comment, if you like. There's so much material, so many vendors doing so many amazing things, product launches, features, mergers, acquisitions. There's so much happening. And I think the Analyst brief, the real modus operandi there was to try and provide a bit of commentary, really, a bit of simple commentary as to what is happening. It's not every week. It's probably a couple of times a month, really. It's trying to provide that commentary around, look, there's so much change around technology, identity, security, all of these overlapping technology areas. And just try and provide a little bit of clarity there, a little bit of an independent view, cut out the vendors speak or the solution providers speak and the gimmicks and the acronyms, provide a bit of real commentary there. Peel back, add a bit of history in there, add some stories, maybe call out some of the vendors perhaps, or maybe call out some of the situations or the buzz terms or whatever it can be, but just to provide that weekly or that monthly view of this is the snapshot of what's happening. This is a bit of an independent view of how things are going, maybe why they're heading in that way. So it's trying to provide that contemporary view, if you like, of all the change which is happening, and there's a lot of change. As you can tell, there's all the technology change. There's a lot of stuff happening. So it's trying to provide that comment. I think is the big goal.
Well, there's so much to cover. I feel like, when Jim and I started this 6 years ago now, I guess at this point, it's like, all right, well, at some point we're going to run out of things to talk about. I mean, it's identity and access management. What can you possibly do? And here we are, 6 years later, 347 episodes and counting. And there's just always something happening, and there's something new to report on. And you're putting out so much content between the podcast and the reports and the I guess the Moffatt laws of identity security that you put out earlier this year. Tell me a little bit about what those laws are and what are you trying to get out into the identity sphere of influence with those things.
Oh, that was good. I quite like it. A lot of the stuff that Cyput does, and probably a lot of the stuff I do really personally, is just to get conversation going, it's get discussion going, involving as many different people as possible, many different voices. And for me, it's always about the signals which get generated, the conversations, not necessarily to be provocative or get people disagreeing, but just get people thinking and discussing. And the laws was part of that. Laws was a tongue-in-cheek thing around describing it, or having to try and describe it. What are some of the best practices really around this area of protecting our identity infrastructure, our identity landscape? Because it's under attack. There's no question about that. You can Google on any day of the week, and you can find a data breach of some description, and it probably has identity at the center. No pun intended. There's identity somewhere in those breach reports. So the techniques and tactics and procedures, there's somewhere in there, whether it's human or non-human identity, something's gone wrong with that identity landscape. So the laws aspect was trying to say, look, we need to just have a conversation here around what identity security looks at. How can we protect all of this identity stuff that we have in there? And to be honest, there's one or two disagreements. And the biggest disagreement, for those who haven't read them all, there's 10 basic statements in there. I think there's number 3, which is the one which always gets people chatting. I think it's the carbon life one. Oh, go on there, you can dive in. The thing that the law is something around every identity should at some stage be tied back to a carbon life form, so a physical person ultimately, especially for the workloads, NHI, agentic AI, you name it, smart TVs, anything where there isn't a physical person there. And it was, I think a lot of people, once they actually understand and nod and agree, actually, that's probably not a bad thing. But the problem is with this is that actually a lot of our human identity records and identity profiles are not linked to a carbon life form either, which is the subtle part which a lot of people miss. Because even if your Active Directory record, it's not necessarily tied to a biometric, validated and verified identity. It's just Simon's AD entry with the UPN and whatever else. So there's a bit of a subtlety in that around trying to make this real for all identities. But yeah, the laws was really, again, having some discussion, putting a flag in this. I don't want to own the flag in the sand, but I will put the flag there, and we can all at least dance around it or discuss it and get those topics on people's agenda around talking about policy, talking about cleanliness of identity data, humans, people, software, devices. Let's talk about all of that stuff as well, and just raise awareness was the idea behind it.
So Simon, I remember when you posted this on LinkedIn, I went out and read them. And by the way, I think one of the things I know you for, and probably other people know you for, is you're not afraid to be bold. And exactly, number 3 jumps off the page to me because I agree with it. And I know most people don't agree with it. It's that, basically the controversial part. The controversial part is that every non-human identity must map to a physical person who essentially owns it. who can speak for it. I do think the one potential exception is that if AI becomes advanced enough, it could be a representation of a person. In other words, able to make decisions. So I think that and I don't think we're there now, but at some point you might have a company where there aren't people, where basically the whole company is run by bots. And maybe those bots are the decision makers, and identities as we know them are owned by that bot. So I think that could be an exception. I know, that's super sci-fi at the moment, but I thought it was great.
Let me argue against that point, because I think those bots, unless this is a 100% AI company, there is still theoretically a human at the very top. They might be the CEO, founder, bottle washer, janitor, and all these agents or AI or whatever things that all map to them. Do we get to the point where an entire company, like a legal entity, a definition of a company is 100% AI? I have a feeling we would probably put a stop to that at some point, at least until the AI takes over the judicial system and the governance and stuff like that. But
here's my thought on that, Jeff, because I think that's a good point. But I think the intent of that statement or that law is that a person who is accountable for it. In other words, you understand enough about what it's doing to say whether or not it should exist. If you have a billion bot company, or say $1 billion size company, and it's all robots, and maybe there are a few humans at the top, those humans probably can't be accountable at that level, and you may delegate the decision to a bot that is smart enough to determine whether or not that access is appropriate. A lot of supposing there. But I think the key point is what Simon made, which is essentially that some life form, whether it's artificial or real, has to be able to make the decisions for identities. Like an identity that, runs a computer process or robotic process. You just can't leave these things kind of unattended and have nobody accountable for deciding whether or not that access is appropriate. And I think that is my concern, is that when we call these identities, to me, they're really accounts. They're accounts that exist. They're not identities.
I agree. I disagree. I think the accountability thing is really what's important here. I think there's a good slide that does the rounds, I think, on LinkedIn and socials. It's by IBM in the 70s, and it talks about no machine should have decision-making capabilities or management capabilities, maybe it says, because it can't be held accountable. Now, that accountability is really important. It's also a separation between decision-making and accountability. Now, if you talk about agentic AI and whatever may come over the next decade, all for autonomous decision making, that's just going to happen. There's no way you can let get in the way of that and put the genie back in the bottle. That's going to happen. The autonomous decision making, which is perfectly legitimate if you have accountability, of a chain of accountability around who has the final say, who is going to be the person on the hook in the court of law to say, yes, that was me. That was my responsibility to do so. And I think soon as you have a disconnection there, you have a whole host of liability issues and process issues and governance issues around how that data processing or how that organization should be run. So it was really all about saying, look, we have this brand new world potentially of autonomous decision making, which is absolutely necessary and scalable. But you have to have some sort of accountability there. And it may just start off being a team. It could be a team that responds to an OAuth 2 client. This SecOps team owns this particular OAuth 2 client. Perfectly fine, because you then know who in that team to go and knock on the door and say, hey, this OAuth 2 client is whatever, behaving suspiciously or whatever it can be. But you need to have that lineage, I think, to a physical person. Yeah, maybe 100 years from now or 50 years from now, we do have bot wars. And, I watched the film recently, the Electric State, it was called, Electric State film. That was pretty sci-fi with robots and humans and stuff. And there's absolutely some potentially terrifying use cases ahead. But
So
I think
being held
tying stuff to
accountable
a person-
for an AI would be you're getting unplugged for 10 years. It's like going to jail.
Exactly. So yeah, I think the whole thing about the laws was having these sort of conversations. I think you got to start somewhere. I think.
So this whole topic of AI fascinates me, and I think we're sort of at an inflection point here where people are starting to wonder, well, am I going to have a job when AI comes around? And one of the things that's been making the rounds, I think, especially in the consulting world and probably the analyst world as well, can I just have an AI do the same things that Jim, Jeff, and Simon are doing if it's just spitting out stuff? And there was an article that was put out by Mike Neuenschwander around this very topic, and I think he's hopefully right. That it's like, yeah, we're not dead yet. There's still plenty to go, and I think there's still going to be opportunities for being able to leverage those types of tools, but maybe take, hey, here is Simon's brain, maybe to some degree, and here's what he's thinking. But you're always going to have the individual human element where, we're ideating, we're thinking about, okay, where things are going. And at some point, maybe we do borrow that line a little bit, but where do you feel about AI and, this idea of it replacing consulting, for any number of topics? Because it's not just IAM, right? It's doctors, it's lawyers. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff happening right now.
Absolutely right. Look, I think first of all, progress is always scary. I think for all parts of society and for all parts of the world. And I think there's a few cliches you can throw out around. The future's here; it's just not evenly distributed, and things like this. And the Industrial Revolution. I'm doing this podcast now, sort of 20 minutes south of Manchester, which was the sort of world's first industrialized city, sort of 250 years ago. And obviously, when the Industrial Revolution came along, that was a scary place. If you were a subsistence farmer in rural Cheshire or Midwest or wherever it could be, suddenly, wow, this huge big city with factories and mills and automation, steam engines and this sort of stuff, that was a pretty scary time. The pros and cons for where the Industrial Revolution has taken us, I guess, but ultimately it was change which you couldn't stop. So I think AI is here to stay, first of all. I think, will it impact jobs? Yeah, absolutely will. No doubt about that for the next probably 3, 5, 10 years, I guess. A lot of jobs which repeatable jobs which will be automated purely for productivity reasons. Flip side, of course, if you're looking at things like government services, health triage systems, banking systems, government services where you do have finite resources, you can't do everything with the budgets you have, you leverage automation. So there's positive benefits to being able to triage and scale services in certain ways. I guess back to your question around replacement of people. We've experimented with stuff at the Cyberhut with AI, virtual analyst stuff for internal uses, and by that we've fed it, if you like, we fed it all of the Cyberhut's content. So things like research reports and things that we have generated and I've generated and book material and everything else. And it's very easy to create a very powerful system. I guess there's a couple of things I would add to this, though. It's very easy to get an answer for something or to create a system that will give you an answer for something. It's not so easy to have the right questions. And this is where I think the value comes to play from being an experienced practitioner, where you know the questions to answer, you know the questions that need to be asked. And that's a big difference. Very easy to go and do a search and say, right, give me a identity assessment framework for IGA, whatever. You're going to get some stuff splurted out there, and great. What can you do with this? But I think being able to, again, leverage judgment, leverage creativity, leverage the ability to ask the right questions, that really only comes with human experience. I always quite like another cliched quote around the guy who gets hired to fix the big engine on the big in the big industrial plant, and the engine's not working effectively. It's making a horrible noise, and he gets brought in. He comes in, he looks at it, and he just whacks it with a hammer. It takes him 30 seconds. Gets the hammer out of his bag, whacks the engine. The engine starts working. He gives a bill to the factory owner and says, "There you go. That's a bill for $500." And the guy goes, "Well, that just took you 30 seconds. All you did was whack it with a hammer. So yeah, absolutely. But I knew exactly where to hit the machine with my hammer. And that's the sort of stuff which potentially AI can't do, because it's bringing out that judgment, the experience, that creativity angle. But I think there's some huge benefits. Summarizations, being able to query things quickly, being able to rapidly get to at least an area where the human can add a bit more judgment to the equation. So I think
I think the one thing, Simon, is that it's hard to say where AI will be in 10 years. I'd say, looking at AI right now, you're right. It lacks the creativity. It's almost like a calculator. A calculator can do arithmetic far better than a human can. But the human has to decide what goes into the calculator, how the calculations get applied to something, et cetera. And I think AI is sort of similar. Like, we can never research the internet or summarize these large amounts of data in the way that AI can. But what we bring to the table is the creative application of that data and what we want to get out of that data. Now, maybe where AI is 10 years from now is you say, hey, here's some examples of information. Maybe you plug some raw data into it and you say, here's the kind of output that I want. And boom, Analyst report is birthed from that. I actually could see a process, and I messaged this to Mike, where potentially you could have AI tell you, hey, this is the kind of data, or tell me what kind of data I need to gather from a vendor to tell me about their, the example he uses is ITDR, for your ITDR solution. Now you get that output. Now you feed into AI all the output all the vendor questionnaires responded to. You give some samples of, here's the kind of papers that I'm looking to create. Cross these two things, get what you can find on the internet, and produce me an ITDR paper. I bet you it could be pretty good that way.
So yeah, but look, I think there's huge opportunities, huge value, and I think you're right in the sense of where will it be 10 years from now? I think there's probably a lot of ambiguity there. And I think we're definitely probably not going to need to spawn under the podcast there, but there's definitely issues around things like misinformation, disinformation, data authenticity, and where the output is going to be used for. And I think we're definitely moving towards a realm of assume fake, if that makes sense. I think we in the enterprise we assume breach. That we talk about zero trust, we assume the network's breach. Now probably got to assume that everything online is fake. Everything's generated. It's a deep fake. It's the content is synthesized. Articles perhaps do not have factual information in them, or they are synthesized and blended. So there's definitely my bigger worry really is all about that authenticity of the data origin, really, and providing data origin authentication against a piece of content, and making sure it's the origin of it, you can trust it, and you can use that as part of something else. And that to me is not really an area being actively solved at the minute. I think that's the biggest, a bigger worry for me going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one of the main reasons we wanted to get you onto the show, Simon, is you're producing this book. Producing is the term I chose to use because it's not just writing. I mean, this is a production that you put forth. Tell us, what is the book called and what is it about?
Yeah, this is my second book. It's called IAM at 2035. So IAM at 2035. Basically, it's a future guide to identity security. 10 years from now, which does seem a long time to go in the current evolution of things. Why, I guess, why would I bother doing another book? So I did a book about 4 years ago looking at B2C identity, so consumer and customer identity and access management. And as books go, you typically never finish a book. And by this, you write a book and then you get asked to do a second edition and et cetera, and you sort of leverage that book for consultancy and whatever else. And it came to a point, a real inflection point, probably about 2.5 years ago, I guess, when there were more non-identity people asking about B2C, application owners, digital owners, non-technical sort of product leads and others who are wanting to know about B2C identity, which is quite an obvious thing because B2C covers a whole host of different stakeholders. But it just got me thinking around, okay, well, B2C is changing, but the whole identity landscape is changing. And there's a whole host of new stakeholders wanting to understand what identity is, where it's been for the past 25 years, what are the current problems now, and obviously where things may be heading to. So IAM at 2035, essentially, it's based on the back of probably 2 years of interviews and briefings as part of the Cyber Hub, being interviewed, being briefed, I should say, of all of the interesting startups doing a whole host of different technology areas, from passwordless authorization, ITDR, ISPM, NHI, new authentication flows, orchestration, identity data management, identity risk management, the whole thing around AI and agentic AI in there as well. So there's so much going on. I felt compelled to try and focus upon where we were, essentially where we are today, all the problems we have today around lack of coverage, NHI, cloud versus hybrid, decentralized versus centralized, access control is a bit of a mess, to be honest. With all this stuff around identity as an attack surface because of visibility concerns and behavioral monitoring issues. So there's a lot going on with identity, but it's becoming more important. So getting identity right can deliver huge benefits to B2E workforce productivity and security. It can deliver revenue and services online. It can help with the disinformation thing we were talking about earlier, integrates with data and network and endpoint security. So you get it right. You're on a huge opportunity to deliver robust, secure services. And I guess that the sort of second half of the book is looking ahead, where things may end up in the next decade, looking at things like intent, looking at attribution. So I guess back to number 3 in those laws around being able to really tie identities to a biometric. We're talking about people, looking at behavioral monitoring, intent of identity behaviors, looking at the whole world of how can we secure this identity ecosystem if we are starting to see IAM and cyber merge together. So it was really trying to say, look, this is where we are now, a bit of the history there and a bit of the future view of where things are going to. And it's been a really good journey, an enjoyable journey, if not a long one.
Yeah, my favorite part, to be honest, was the history part. And I think you could probably just write a book on the history. But I could tell even there had to be some things left on the cutting floor. So when you look back on it, can you tell us what were the things you said they have to be in here? And what did you end up cutting that you were, especially things, what I'm really interested in is like, it almost made it, but it didn't.
Oh, wow. It's funny. Doing a book it's a little bit like going on holiday with a very small suitcase and you're desperately trying to cram your swimming trunks and your jumpers and your sunglasses and your Lido and all. You're trying to squeeze it all into this tiny suitcase and you can't get everything in. So you really have to be quite brutal with stuff. And it is difficult when you are trying to do two things. One, trying to get your experience across. You could get AI to write a book if you want to. I'm sure AI will do a great job of that, but it's probably going to be pretty dry. So part of both the books I've written, we're all trying to put your experience across. What I've learned, my mistakes, the anecdotal conversations, the water cooler chat, the linking together of maybe some patterns I've heard or seen, really somehow trying to put my experience, right and wrong, in a book which people can obviously hopefully then wrap into their world as well. So I think that in itself it can generate content. I think the stuff that missed out, I think you've always got to think of your audience. So who is the audience for this book? And it's really, it isn't just identity practitioners, first of all. It's a whole host of different personas I'd like to think can gain benefit from this, non-technical as well as technical, the security landscape, data, application owners, CISOs, C-level, people who are non-technical in honesty, and really should take them on that zero to hero journey. And I think the stuff which you then pull out of there is often some of that really fine-grained detail, explaining what zero trust is, for example. Well, you can go Google that, to be honest with you, or the difference between OAuth 2 and OIDC. So there's a lot of maybe fine-grained detail in there, which you sort of assume can be found elsewhere ultimately. So there's a lot of that stuff gets sort of dropped, and I try and raise up a little bit some of those meta patterns and some of those bigger trends and sort of highlight my sort of experience in there.
Yeah, so I think you covered well, like who should read it. Now, how should they read it? Should they read it like you eat an elephant one bite at a time, or like you eat a 30-inch pizza all in one sitting?
Oh, well, this 30-inch pizza, I reckon you could do that. It's 2 pizzas, isn't it? 30-inch pizza. That's probably 2 regular pizza. I think I could do that. Anyway.
What depends on your definition of 2 is.
Well, yeah. It's a really interesting question. So the book essentially, I think 16 chapters we ended up with. And ultimately, it's based on the sort of standard model of situation, complications, implication, solution. And obviously, the first thing people look for is, give me the solution page. Give me what does 2035 look like? Give me the ideas. Give me the buzzwords or the vendors or the categories that will definitely exist in 2035. So I reckon a lot of people will aim for that. Now, in my opinion, you're better off reading the whole book. You can get through it, I imagine, pretty rapidly. So I think it is a journey read. It is looking at understanding the past so you can better predict the future. You can't understand the future unless you've got a good understanding of history, and I think that is vitally important. So my recommendation would be to start at the beginning with a coffee and slowly go through it. You can probably do less than an hour per chapter. I think 16 hours, probably condense that into 12 hours. It's not a long period of time. So my recommendation would be to read it through in a journey, and
enjoy
it. Exactly.
Is the book going to change people's mind about anything? Are there preconceived notions that most of us identity practitioners are walking around with, and you read the book and you're like, I needed to question the way I was thinking?
I hope so. I think they'll definitely change the mindset of non-identity people. I think it'll definitely put identity as a more strategic enabler. I think 25 years ago, identity was the purview of the CIO of operations. It was focused on productivity and compliance. It's not that anymore. It's certainly a strategic fulcrum within even the smallest enterprises. You can't be secure without identity. You can't deliver online services without identity. You cannot deliver employee productivity without identity. You can't do anything really. You can't do this podcast without identity. So there's a lot of things I think which will probably surprise non-identity practitioners. I think for the people who've been in the identity space for a long time, I think it will give a better set of analytical tools. I think there's a lot of assumptions you can make if you spend a long time in any technology sector. And I think it's really about unpicking some of those maybe bad habits or complacencies we all get into, and trying to say, look, have a fresher, I guess, more contemporary analytical framework to look at how identity should be measured, how it should be integrated, what problems it should be solving, in trying to help analyze both the vendors and also existing deployments, because nobody has the luxury of designing things from scratch and picking out the best technologies. You have to deal with existing systems, existing problems. So I think the big takeaway will be at least provide people with a set of analytical tools that they can look at their existing systems, existing vendors, existing suppliers, and be a little bit more informed around what success looks like for some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I think is, like, you come with such a great perspective. You kind of gave that history, but also, like I said, I think your creativity and kind of how you set yourself up for this deep thinking, and also your willingness to be bold and to not just accept like, okay, this is what everybody's saying, but I'm going to question it and I'm going to put out some big statements and not everybody's going to agree with it. That's going to get people thinking and potentially change some minds. But I'm wondering now, what did you learn through writing the book? Did you start to question your own thinking?
100%. Yeah, I genuinely did. Yeah, I think, I've been, as you guys have, you do this stuff for a long time. You do get into patterns of thinking, patterns of behavior, assumptions around certain things. And I think it's quite refreshing, I think, to be briefed by technology startups who are early in their journey, if you like, maybe tackling, I don't know, behavioral analytics or NHI or modern approaches to authorization or some quite esoteric parts of our identity world. And they bring a freshness to that. And you have to be, you have to question that. You have to question it both business and technical as to their backstory. But equally, you've got to be open-minded, I think, as well. And I think there's definitely opportunities for huge improvement across all parts of our identity life cycles. And to me, that's what keeps me interested in this, because I think, you could easily sit there and say, well, we still haven't solved the LDAP RBAC problem. And to be honest, we probably never will. So you accept that and move on and start tackling some of the more prescient problems, if you like. But I think I always try and keep an open mind. Don't accept, don't reject. Question the assumptions of things, question the assumptions of vendors, question the assumptions of design and what real problem is being solved. And I think that is definitely refreshed me over the last couple of years. I think definitely kept me invigorated as to IAM being a really powerful, dynamic industry that will definitely be around 10 years from now. I think there's no question of that.
So with this idea of like all this proliferation of writing that you do, I want to take us to a lighter note here as we kind of wrap up the show and talk about if you were, writing a fictional story. Do you have any ideas on what a fictional book might be from the mind of Simon Moffatt?
Oh God, digging into my mind. Well, that's a fun. Do you know? I do like writing. I think writing is a very enjoyable pastime. I think I don't actually read a lot of fiction. I must say, I typically read nonfiction, essays, biographies, history books, how the world works. Sort of thing. And I've actually I try and keep my local library running. There's a big thing in the UK about libraries closing down. So I try and go to the library relatively frequently. And I'm probably 4 or 5 books at the minute into the whole history of looking at the natural world, if you like. I'm reading an absolutely amazing book at the minute about eastern owls in eastern Russia. A guy went over to eastern Russia about 20 years ago, and he researched these fish owls, massive big birds of prey fish owls, in eastern Russia on the Japanese Sea of Japan. And he spent 5 years going through the eastern coast of Russia, tracking these fish owls, measuring them, checking their habitat, all that sort of stuff. I love all that carry on. It's real life. It's, again, back to the memoirs, and he's trying to transpose his experience into us non-fish owl experts. So I'm into that sort of thing, and non-fiction would be me. I think if I had to write something non-professional, I would probably go down the sort of essayist route. So writing of essays around how we live our life, how to take a walk in the countryside, how to make a cup of tea, and how to drink a pint of beer, these sorts of things, which you can extend over 5 or 6 pages, I think, and really uncover the real world. I think that would probably be that could be a nice hobby, I think. Describing the mess we're all leaving this planet in, that sort of stuff.
What would be the setting for this? Would it be something that is like realistic, a place that you've visited? Is it something maybe a little more fantastical or fantasy? Like, give me the idea of like, okay, I'm reading about this character who is learning how to, sounds like, relax in life a little bit, take a step back and maybe have a cup of tea or some other beverage.
it will be contemporary, so it'll be right now. It'll be 2025. Saying I wouldn't do a non-fiction, but I did start an idea for something, and it was based on the back of reading 1984 by George Orwell, dystopian novel where everything's terrible, and my book was going to be called 2361, right? And the reason for this. 23, the hour, 23, 61 meant 61 minutes past midnight, which you can never get to, of course. Now, the reason being, long story short, it was all focused on the doomsday clock. If you've heard of the doomsday clock, which is, I think it's at 89 seconds to midnight at the minute, which is the destruction of the planet, the nuclear annihilation of everything. It's clicked forward to 89 seconds to midnight, and my idea was to say what happens at 1 minute past midnight when the whole world is in a dystopian mess. But yeah, I didn't think it would be a happy ending sort of book, so I thought I might park that for the time being and focus on 2025 and how we can all live a slightly better life.
Not to be confused with the Iron Maiden song 2 minutes to midnight, which is, I guess, roughly kind of the same idea. Jim, if you were to write a fictional book, what would you write about?
All right, I got this idea. So I've switched companies a couple of times, and when you switch companies, you have the ability to take your retirement, roll it out of your 401k in the U.S., which is like the employment retirement package, to an IRA, which is kind of like an independent retirement package. And during that time, it's kind of like you have to transfer all your money into cash, freeze it, and then it goes into your IRA and you select the investments that you want it to go into. I'm not sure exactly how that process, but I've done it a few times, but it's been a while. Anyway, so the backdrop of my story would be the character in the book is switching jobs and decides, okay, he's going to roll his money over. It gets frozen in cash. And then the market tanks. I mean, it drops like 85%. And then it's out of his control. It's frozen in cash. Then it gets put into the market when it's down 85%. It bounces back up even higher than it was. And so now the guy's like an instant multi-millionaire with dumb luck, right? So now he's got all this money. And then he goes to the doctor. And the doctor says, you have only 2 days to live. And so now he has all these millions of dollars and he has to spend it, or he has to decide what to do with it in 2 days. He hadn't given us any thought because, he basically by dumb luck became a multimillionaire. And now he finds out he only has 2 days or some short amount of time to live. And he's got to figure out what to do in that time. And then I think as the kicker, you get to the end of the 2 days or whatever it is, and then you find out that he was still alive, and you go back to the doctor and they'd be like, yeah, we've been trying to call you, but it was going to voicemail. We gave you the wrong person's information. You're actually going to live. There's nothing wrong with you.
You've given this a lot of thought. More than I thought.
I thought about it all within the last hour.
It has elements of Brewster's Millions, Joe versus the volcano. There's
a tragedy. Identity play there, isn't there?
Right. Yeah. There's identity play. Yeah. We tried to get a hold of you, and the wrong information was provided to you.
Auth2 token.
Yeah, I just thought of it. I thought of different parts throughout the show, but I was listening to you, Simon. But I've been thinking about this this investment thing because the markets have been crazy lately. But I also thought about that whole thing about how because it would have been. It's just too obvious to say I bought a lottery ticket and won $10 million. Maybe if I needed to keep that front part of the book short, I would do that. But I think that whole scenario that I just talked about could be a kind of a backdrop that it also ruined a bunch of people, and now there's all these desperate people living in the world. Because one of the offshoots of the story could be that there's all these desperate people, and they kidnap somebody from your family who you had a falling out with, and basically you were estranged from, and they were asking for all of your money so say it was one of your parents, and you were estranged from your parent, and now they're saying they want all the money to release the hostage.
Hopefully it's not like Stalin and his son, where they kidnapped his son and he's like, man, keep him.
Yeah, right. Well, you'll have to read my book.
Yeah, well, get on it. Maybe make an AI co-writer or something to get this out there, get this out of your head.
Yeah, right. It's a good idea.
I can't top that because you have so much detail in this vivid imagination of yours. I was waiting for the downer part of it, and you got to it with the death diagnosis and with the kidnapping and the desperate people all around the world. So it had a little bit of everything, for you.
Yeah. Hey, if I'm going to be the author, there's got to be some downside to the whole thing.
All right. Well, I'll just say probably for me something sci-fi, just because I'm a sci-fi nerd and I'm not super creative. So I don't know even what it would be about, but it would be something far, far in the future where, maybe I can somehow extend my brain to be able to experience all the things I'm going to miss after my mortal life is ended. So maybe it's like an AI version of Jeff, or, I always talk about the Bobaverse set of books, which I think is really good. So maybe something along those lines of like some sort of AI immortality, and what does that actually mean? And, maybe it's something along those lines. So I don't know.
Be good.
Okay. Let's go ahead and wrap it up there for this week. Simon, thank you so much for taking time with us. Really appreciate you stepping in with us. I'll have links in our show notes for everything we talked about today. So a link to the Cyber Hut, as well as the podcast, as well as you are present on LinkedIn, Simon. So hopefully that's all cool with you. And
perfect. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's been great. Let's not wait another 347 episodes to do this again. Let's talk more, and I'm sure we'll see each other at conferences coming up in the future. So with that, we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Thank you, everybody, for watching and or listening. Thank you, Jim, for not really ticking off our listeners at the very beginning. Like and subscribe. That's all we're asking for. Share it with a friend. Share it with an enemy. We don't care as long as somebody's watching or listening. We'll keep doing this. We're on the web, idcpodcast.com. Visit the YouTube channel, idacpodcast.tv. And thanks, everybody. And we'll talk with everybody in the next one.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.